What's up guys, my name is Dom and this is Faith Family Homestead, and today I decided I would give you guys a garden tour. I have done one in the month of February, March, April, and now it is May. So I decided let's go for it. Let's do another garden tour and see what's changed in the garden. I usually start these tours at the back end of my garden, but today I decided that I would start it in the front at the log raised beds. My garden is separated into two different areas. I have log raised beds. Then I have this landscape fabric, the woven weed fabric, and then it goes into my wooden side raised beds. And then I also have an in-ground raised bed down the middle. So I'll just give you guys a quick span over the garden. My daughters are picking strawberries, but this is what it's looking like. The first place I'm going to start is this raised bed right here. I think it's 22 feet by 4 feet, and I originally planted 540 onion starts in here that I got from Dixondale Farms, and it is now coming time to harvest them. I've been harvesting them over when they're falling over, just like when they're ready. There are still plenty of onions in here that need harvesting. I just harvested a bunch yesterday. As you can see, a lot of them have fallen over. I did harvest this big section right here, but there are still lots of onions in here. I'm hoping that they can all just fall around the same time and I can get a major one harvest out of it. I do have plans for this bed after all of the onions to come out to plant maybe another row of tomatoes, and then maybe some zinnias as well. I'm not sure, but I need them to come out. I'm ready for the next crop. When I span over, I have this log raised bed right across from the onions, and I do have tomato plants in the front. These are indeterminate, meaning that they'll keep growing and growing. So I have tomatoes, and then in the front I have dwarf marigolds that I planted from seed, and carrots were already here, so I just left them. And as you can see, and I also have some celery. The brassicas are still in here, but it's like starting to get 100 degrees, so they're gonna have to come out soon, or they're gonna start going to seed. That whole bed used to be full of brassicas and cold weather crops, but then we had a freak freeze and it went down to like 25 degrees or something, and a lot of it when I came out had died, and then the stuff that looked like maybe it could recuperate I left, and they did come back to life. You have some kales, this is supposed to be a Brussels sprout that's not gonna make it to full maturity. I do have a cabbage that's not gonna fully form a head. I have this dinosaur kale here, and then this spot I just took out, or my daughter took out turnips. When we span over, this whole bed is full of purple asparagus. I did run out and then plant green asparagus, but these were crowns that I bought 100 of them, and so there's 100 purple asparaguses in here, and then I had a space down in the end and I planted some more green ones. This whole bed is full of green asparagus. I did not harvest any asparagus this year, but hopefully lots of asparagus in my future. Right over here I have snapdragons, and they are looking lovely. This one is huge. Overachiever right there. Right next to it I have red onions that I planted from seeds back in November, and my dog got in here and dug them up a lot of times, and so they're kind of struggling and lagging behind. But I do have onions in a container that are much bigger than these, planted on the same time. I have a lonely marigold here that I needed a place to put it, so I just put it here. This is where I harvested all of my store-bought garlic. And then at the front I have a bunch of lilies, and I have lilies in pots that I want to get into the ground as well. This is a lovely bowl that my daughters just picked of strawberries. We got maybe roughly a little less than that yesterday, but we're so happy that it's starting to produce strawberries now. In this bed, right next to the bed I just showed you, I have more lilies. I had meant for all my lilies to go here, but then when I came outside the next day, I realized I still had some more lilies, and that was already planted up, and so I just planted them there. But we do have lots of lilies in here. I have a delphinium in here. I know I have echinacea in here, and I also have ground cherry. I don't know if this is the Aunt Molly's ground cherry or the pineapple ground cherry. I planted 4 of them in here, but only 3 made it. This is where I had all my ranunculus, and it has died back, and we're working on cleaning out this bed. But I did go ahead and plant my 1 hollyhock I planted from seed that survived. And in this log raised bed, I have all my Determinate tomatoes and my sweet bell peppers. Determinate just means it's going to grow to a determined size and stop producing and growing. And so I have Grand Marshalls here. I know I have Ace 55s. I have Florida 91. I have, what else? The first ones the first 2 are invincible. And as you can see, they are big enough to reach the trellis. And then in the front, I have some carrots that I had already planted in this bed and dwarf marigolds. I do have a cabbage that I didn't pull out yet, and it has formed a small head there. Not all my tomatoes have been doing well. There's one right here that has stayed pretty much that size, and one down here, an Ace 55, that I'm thinking about replacing because they're not doing well. But how exciting that I have tomatoes reaching the trellis. Right in the front, like I said, I have a bunch of sweet bell peppers. I do not know the varieties of them because I had used permanent marker, and when I was going to write the names, and then when I was going to transplant them, I was going to use tags. But the permanent marker washed away in the rain one day, and so these are all mystery peppers. But I do know that they are sweet because I planted my hot peppers in a completely different container. So that completes all of my log raised beds. When we first moved to this property, it was mostly wooded, and so we had a company come and force mulch so that we could plant and have a garden and stuff like that, grow grass. And so we used some of the logs from the company that they were too close to the house so they couldn't get to. We had another company come out and just limb by limb tear them down, and we didn't want to waste all of that good lumber, wood, so logs, so we used to make log raised beds. Now we are back to our, or not back, but we are at our wooden side garden beds. All of these garden beds cost less than $2 to make. In this first bed, I have leeks, and I also have potatoes in here. The next one, I have some calendula on this side. I do have a variety of wheat. It just wasn't for eating, it was to use in cut flowers, and I had a bunch of them, but a lot of them didn't make it. I also have some random zinnias in here, and then I have beets that are, not gonna actually produce a beet because it's getting too hot for them. Then I have this cross, which is filled with strawberries. I think we ended up planting 350 strawberries in here. And at the corners, I planted 4 borages, but only 2 made it because we had a last freeze. And I covered 2 of them, and I don't know, I think the cover fell off of the last 2. But look how massive this borage is. There's always bees flying around it. It's the biggest borage I've ever seen, ever grown. It is edible, and it tastes like a cucumber-y taste. In this next bed, I have snapdragons that are not as far as long as the other ones that I showed you, but they're still looking really pretty. I do not have anything in these 2 beds, but I plan on putting another arch up here. But then in the next 2 beds, I have bush beans. They're colorful bush beans. And in this bed, it's all perennial flowers that I planted from bulbs that I got from Walmart. So there's lilies, there's back here, these are dahlias, and I see some budding going on. And then I have containers at the end of these raised beds where I planted some squashes, and I just saw that. Look at that. That has, yeah, this is a cue ball squash, and it already has 2 right there. Planted a gray zucchini in here, plant or seed, and it hasn't sprouted. But then I have 2 dwarf tomatoes that are looking good. Down this whole, I think this is 32 feet, has tomatoes going along the back. And then I have bell peppers in the front, and in the middles, of the tomatoes, I have either basils or dwarf marigolds. And they are starting to produce flowers and starting to reach the trellis. So I'm really happy about that. This is the bed that I had trouble with where a lot of my peppers died. I planted a lot of different peppers, not just like regular bell peppers, but a lot of them died because I planted them like a day or two before I had surgery, and then it was super hot, it didn't rain. I couldn't get out here to water. I did ask my kids to water, but they didn't know how deep you should water, if you just water the top and you think it's watered and it's not getting down to the roots. So I did have a lot of peppers die, which is just totally fine. I went to the farm store and got all new bell peppers. It was not the same varieties because I did plant like heirlooms and pretty varieties, colorful, but it still will do and produce fine for my family. In this container, I decided to try a watermelon. It was a, let's see, yellow doll watermelon, and it's only supposed to grow like a vine of 3 feet. I got this from Hostel, and so that's why I wanted to try it in this container, so we'll see how that does. In this container, I have a wild bee bergamot that I planted last year when we were living in our RV, and it came back this year, so I still have it in this container. I have some peppermint, some echinacea, some more tomatoes in those containers, and some more squashes. Right here is a bed full of sunflowers. I planted pro-cut sunflowers and they are growing up nicely, and I'm happy. Can't wait for them to start producing. Right here, I just had my son build me 3 more garden beds because I stopped putting garden beds on this side because I wasn't sure how far our fence would go out. But since we just got our fence a few days ago, I see that we have more space here. So I decided that I would fit 3 more beds here. And then along the fence, I'm going to do an in-ground bed, which is what I wanted to do from the beginning and plant tomatoes in. But since we didn't have it up in time, I planted my tomatoes elsewhere. But this is all of the compost and topsoil that we still have in these containers and everything. So we'll have to get this all cleaned up and get cardboard laid down here and these beds filled. On this first arch trellis, I have cucumbers. So I have a cucamelon on that side. I have a Chinese snake on this side. And then when we come over here, I have a Armenian yard-long cucumber. And I'm not sure what kind of cucumber this is, but I have 4 cucumbers total. And I already had carrots in this bed that didn't, in both beds, that had some crazy germination. And some died when we had that frost. I see that carrot sticking out right there. So that's awesome. I know it's getting too hot for carrots, so I'll just leave them in here a little while longer, but that's exciting. I know my kids will be happy for that. On this next arch trellis, I have watermelons. I planted 4 different types, and there was already parsnips planted in this bed. And I can see that 3 out of 4 watermelon seeds have come up. Actually, I don't think all of them were watermelons. Some of them were just like cantaloupes. And like this one right here was a Tasty Crims melon. This is just a cantaloupe. I did pick out melons that were like 3 to 5 pounds that I could grow on these trellises, and I'll be so happy to see them. Back here, I planted corn in these 3 beds, and they are 3 different varieties of corn. If you saw that video, a lot of people were commenting that they'll cross-pollinate and stuff because I have sweet corn, I have, I think popcorn, and then I have grinding corn maybe. I have to go back and check, but I think that's the order. And they are pollinated. Corn is pollinated when the tassels fall down and to the silks, and then that's what pollinates them. And so they can easily cross-pollinate with wind and stuff like that. And so they tell you only plant 1 variety of corn in your garden at a time, or like, place them far, far apart. But we'll see. I'm experimenting, and I have planted 2 different types of corn in my old garden, and I didn't have any problems with them cross-pollinating, and they definitely weren't 250 feet apart because my garden was way smaller. But, never say never, and we'll just see as it continues to grow. But if you're uncomfortable and just have limited space with experimenting, that you plant them in the same bed, especially if you're like limited on space and you're relying on that crop to feed your family. But me, I have lots of space, and so I'm fine with just experimenting and seeing if, you know, they cross-pollinate or if there's anything I can do to keep them from cross-pollinating. Back here, I planted all of my bare root fruit trees and berry bushes that I've gotten from Stark Brothers and Tai Nursery. I also have my roses that I just received in the mail. I do plan on putting a thornless pink rose across the entrance of my garden. I did also order citrus and bananas from fasttrees.com, and I'm happy with how they came and excited to have citrus as well. Because this is real life and this is what my garden looks like, this is the shame of my garden. It's a complete mess back here, but I've been slowly working to get it cleaned up. I had tulips planted and garlic in these containers, but my dogs dug up before we had our gate so many times and ate tulips and stuff, so I didn't have a good tulip year. My garlics looked very small and sparse. I still have some garlic to harvest. And this one I planted out ginger, and in these containers is where I had my elephant garlic and 2 other garlics that I've already harvested. But these were the red onions that I was telling you about that are doing much better, that I planted from seed. They're much bigger than the other ones up front, so I look forward to harvesting that. That's just a cilantro that went to seed that was in the soil from last year and came up, and I let it just be, and it just looks amazing to me. I have potatoes in this bed and this bed. This one is store-bought potatoes, like organic potatoes that I just got from like Earth Fair and let them sprout, and they are been growing here. This one was from potatoes that I grew last year and just had them underneath my sink forever, like the whole year. So they looked all crazy. I did a video on me planting them. I did see that one of these potatoes have died, and usually you harvest potatoes when they die, but it seems a little early, so I will dig and see what's going on with that. So I decided to just dig a little, and I do see that there is a potato here. So it's a small one, but nonetheless it's still a potato, so that's exciting to know. So down the center or the edges of these beds, I have these Dollar Tree planters. Most of them, or a lot of them, have strawberries in them, but some of them do have bush beans. Some has herbs in them, and I do have 2 that has cucumbers in it. I did plant some nasturtium in here, some dwarf snow peas in here, and some tomatoes as well. I even have a bell pepper. But on my next 2 trellises that I have right here, they are all pole beans. And then in this one I did plant some zucchinis as well as some other varieties of squash that look like zucchini, like the striped one, a golden one. So there's 7 of them right here. I did have my daughter go ahead and plant some sunflowers at the ends of each bed, but I'm not sure where exactly, because in any of the beds I don't see any sunflowers popping up, or maybe it was just the seeds were bad. I don't know, but I'm gonna go back and plant okra at the ends of some beds. If you're wondering what this big pile is, this is all from seed starting potting soil that seeds didn't germinate, and I had my daughter just dump it here because this bed was kind of low, and so we'll scrunch all of that up. There's nothing planted in there though. Along this gate, I do have some more lilies planted back here. I have a cucumber, I have some clematis there and there, and then I have just celosia that I needed to get out of pots that I put in here. I also have, I think there's a couple dahlias that sprouted that I needed a place to put, so I put them in here. But then I decided I wanted to try to grow this cucumber inside of this container. It is supposed to be a dwarf cucumber, I think. It's either the miniature white or the bushy cucumber, but I decided I would try to grow it right here with this trellis because I bought a bunch of these years ago when I thought tomatoes could trellis in them. They were like 20 cents, so I have so many of them, so I wanted to use them. But in this bed, I have 3 tomatoes plants. There's an Ace 55 there and there, and then I have an Arkansas traveler at the end. But then all of these are sweet peppers, and then in the front, my son planted some nasturtiums. In this bed behind the pole beans, I also have some more squashes and a ground cherry that I need to get out, and I think I'll put it in this bed. I'm not 100% sure yet. But then on the next trellis, I do have more melons. I have a golden nugget that has not germinated right here, but then this melon has sprouted, and this was an Indian variety that hasn't sprouted, and this yellow petite melon hasn't sprouted either. Moving all along down the fence, I have a 42-day tomato that I got from M.I. Gardner. It's supposed to be the fastest fruiting tomato. It is an indeterminate, so it'll keep growing. I have a tomato plant here that I don't know the variety. And then I have 3 purple tomatillos here that I need a place for. And there's nothing planted in the front at the moment. Across this fence, I do have pole beans that are not looking so good. So I'm thinking about, I've tried to fish fertilize them. I've tried just putting blood meal around them, and they're just not looking good. So I'm thinking about, except for that one right there is the only one, replanting them. I do have a Market More cucumber right here at the end, and then in the front I planted dwarf zinnias. Behind me I have another 2 beds of potatoes that I planted out here, and those were from seed potatoes. And in this container I have another, I think this is a melon. And then in the next 3 beds I have nothing planted in, but there are pole beans along the fence. Then right here I have all of my teddy bear sunflowers, as well as the sunflowers that I got from Sunflower Steve planted here. And I'm so excited for Sunflower Steve's sunflowers to be planted in my garden. In this next bed, I have a bunch of, these are gladiolus in the front, and then, or in the back, and then in the front I have some lilies. Some is about to open. My daughter's carrying around a water can to water things. Down the center is where I planted my sugar baby melons and my Cottageville melons. They have not sprouted yet, but I'm had to replant them, so hopefully soon. And then nothing planted in this bed, but then in this bed is where all my hot peppers are. And as you can see, they have lots of flowers already forming. I have lots of different hot peppers here. My family doesn't really care for hot peppers like that, or spicy. My kids think anything is spicy. Black pepper is spicy. So I didn't plant a lot of hot peppers, but I'm happy to have them. I also have basils planted here with them. If you're wondering what the dead matter is, every time I've pulled off leaves from plants, if they weren't diseased, I just laid them here as mulch. But then I have 3, 6, 9, 12 different types of basils here. And you can see that this one's going to seed, that one is already going to seed. And I'll just pull off the top right there and let it keep growing. These are dwarf basil, Greek basils, and they're so cute. I have this summer savory right here that's like mint, and it smells amazing. When I planted it, it was this big. I didn't know it would come out so far. It smells better than peppermint. Right behind these hot peppers, this is just a bed filled with different types of flowers. So I have poppies here. I have little Xanthus that I started from seed. I have zinnias in here. I have, I think, some cosmos, bells of Ireland. Basically, any seed that I started and they didn't have great germination, or I killed them, or whatever the case, they went in that bed. At the front, this is the first thing I did, was plant 8 blueberry bushes here, and this one has the most blueberries, so I look forward to having a handful of blueberries this year. But then behind it, I had dug a trench and planted, or my daughters helped me plant, a bunch of, these were daffodils and like hyacinth stuff that I knew deer wouldn't get, because we do have a bad deer problem here. And then behind it, I decided that I wanted to utilize this gate, so I had planted sugar snap peas on this side, and then regular shelling peas on this side. But again, with that last freeze, a lot of them died. So I ended up, there are some that are getting really big, but they have lots of aphids on them. I did decide to go ahead and plant. I had extra tomatoes, so I just threw them up here, and as you can see, some of them are actually surviving. It isn't even the best soil or anything. This is just soil that was already here, and I just survival of the fittest. Let's put them there. So I'll be curious to see how they do up here. And then I also decided to plant cucumbers along this fence. So I have a pickling cucumber, I have Space Master, I also have a Market More, and I have the bushy kind, and they're just all along this fence right here. I lied and said that that was all log raised beds, but I realized I didn't talk about this one. This one was all, we had bachelor buttons in the front, and then we had snapdragons, and then I also had planted 3 artichokes, but only 2 artichokes survived. So I wanted to use this space, so I ended up putting tomatoes down, and as you can see, that one's not looking too hot, but I do have some tomatoes that, like this one, that have taken off. That one amongst the snapdragons. I didn't remove the bachelor buttons because I wasn't ready to do anything with this bed, and right now they are just filling up space, which I thought was awesome. But they are starting to die and everything right now, and so hopefully I will pull those out and then get another crop in there. That is it. You have toured my whole garden. I'm so happy about how this space turned out. If you don't know, I started planting this space back in December when it was nothing but just grass. We did have some big pine trees lining the driveway on both sides, and we had those forest mulch, and then I decided to turn this space into my garden because it was right out my front door, and it had lots of sun because the sun rises right through those trees back there. And so this has lots and lots of sun, except for when the sun's setting back there through all of the trees. So I'm out here, and even though it's still hot, I am shaded, so I really enjoy that. But now is where I'm gonna say bye, because I have lots of seeds that I want to get planted in this ground, and my husband is about to stretch this fence, and he may need my help because my son's at a baseball game. So I'll see you guys next time.